Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wareham Planning Board agenda, Monday, July 11th, 2022. We'll open our meeting with a roll call. Sherry Quirk.
Here.
Mike Baptiste.
Here.
Jane Gleason.
Here.
Sam Corbett.
Here.
Carl Schultz.
Here.
And the chair is here. So everyone is here and accounted for. Preliminary business. Before we dive into the Minded Avenue case number, Charlie, can we bring up Master Millwork under the preliminary business?
Can if you wish.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to kind of put that to bed.
Okay. I did tell Han and Hassie that there were things on the agenda, so I wasn't sure exactly when he might pop in.
Yeah. Well, I think your report kind of sums up everything that the board would
Yeah.
need to know anyway.
Well, I met with him at the end of last week after a request from him saying that he'd finished up a lot of things and just wanted to put this whole thing behind him and get cleaned up. The building inspector had pulled his temporary certificate of occupancy. He was not able to put any workers or anybody in the new addition. So I made the inspection, and with the exception of the loam and seed and a couple of things to do with a couple of trees out front, which he hasn't pulled back in vertical yet, he has taken care of other things. And it's my view that you could consider the project completed subject to the conditions that I put into my letter of July 8th, which was to first vote on the bond, which he has. He has a performance bond in the amount of $50,000.
And we did confirm that does exist.
We confirmed that it is perpetual, basically, until the town says we're either going to call it or things are completed. So we don't have to worry about it having expired, although the original date of the bond was 2021. My recommendation is that you simply vote formally to approve that bond, so that it's a part of your record. Secondly, that at the end of that you establish a 2-year period for the bond to be in existence, so that you can be sure that all the landscaping really takes hold, that the grass is germinated well. He has a irrigation system in place, but there's not been enough germination yet to consider that it's up and thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing would be that at the end of that 2-year period, if everything is fine, that an inspection be done, notice be given to Master Millworks that it is completed, and that he could then, you could send a direction actually to the insurance company saying that you no longer need the bond.
The bond can be
So
released.
those are my recommendations in the letter that I sent to you on July 8th. I think Hanan has made a good faith effort. He's trying.
Yeah.
So, and he's done a lot of work out there since. There was an area in the back that really needed to be dressed up that he took care of. The plan called for a stockade fence to be put up. That's been installed. The landscaping essentially is there. He had to add some concrete between the rear steps and the pavement out on the back. He did that sort of voluntarily because there wasn't anything on the site plan that said he had to. And then there was some loam and seed areas that had absolutely nothing, which he's taking care of. So with those things in place and sort of giving him a little bit of support here, I recommend that you adopt these things.
Okay. I personally have to agree with you. I think ever since our original discussion with him where we told him this was pretty much make or break, he really stepped on the gas and got some stuff done.
Yeah.
So, okay. Is there any comment from the board on this before we take a vote to accept the bond? Mr. Schultz?
Just a question. What triggered the zoning enforcement officer to go down and pull the CO? Was there or did he just look at the date and under his own initiative?
It was under his own initiative, based on the date.
Well, I think that's a positive step forward in our relationship with the zoning enforcement officer then. Could we view that way?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
I would have to agree. I think we're making forward motion in zoning enforcement. So I think it was a good thing.
And then just to confirm my understanding, supporting what Mr. King said, Charlie, you think our relationship with the project team at Master Millworks has turned around? It's substantially turned around.
I do. The conversations I've had with Mr. Massey are recent conversations because I was not in touch with him as a part of the project when it first started. He had somebody on site who was sort of the project manager, and things got off to a pretty rocky start there during that phase. That other individual is no longer associated with the project or with Master Millworks, the way I understand it. And Mr. Massey has basically taken the reins himself and realizes that he should have had a more positive role to begin with. But in that discussion with him, he just wants to get out from underneath all of the difficulties he's had and get building things in his new addition. So he's trying. He really is.
Okay. Anybody else?
One other thing I'd like to add to this.
No?
The agreement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The agreement on the bond of only 50,000 was that it would be guaranteed, the landscape would be guaranteed for 3 years. So I'd ask you to do it for 3 years on the bond, on the guarantee.
Okay. Well, that's better than 2, so that's definitely a plus in our column. All right, so having heard that, and recommendations from Mr. Rowley, I would entertain a motion to accept the bond for Master Millworks in the amount of $50,000 that will be held for the next 3 years to guarantee the vegetation and two small trees, I think you said, right?
Yeah, it's essentially, it's a bond against the performance for all landscape.
For landscaping
And there will be a site inspection.
at the end of the 3 years, or beforehand if it's so deemed necessary.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Sam Corbett, seconded by Jane Gleason. All in favor? Sherry Quirk?
Aye, if I can vote.
Hey, you should be able to vote on this, right? It's not an A and R.
No, but if there are
Site
5 regular members, then she doesn't get to vote.
Sherry, you're just not going to catch a break.
That's okay.
Mike Baptiste?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Kyle?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, 5-0-0.
Mr. Chairman, just as a courtesy to Mr. Massey, I wonder if it would be appropriate just to have a note sent to him saying that you did vote the bond for a 3-year period,
Mhm.
and that you have accepted the bond in his behalf for that time.
Okay.
Just so he knows that it's there, because I'm assuming he's gonna wanna go back to the building inspector at some point and get an occupancy permit.
Mm-hmm.
I assume this takes care of any issues with respect to the site plan and the completion of that.
Correct.
So without that, without some sort of documentation that says the remaining issues being landscaping are now secured by
By the bond.
performance bond, he may get held up again. And
Okay.
just encourage you to do that in his behalf so that he can get going.
So could we
Can we-
also then send a note to the zoning enforcement officer?
I think that would be a good
Copy
idea.
him
Yeah.
with the letter you send to Mr. Massey, I think would be appropriate.
Okay. Monique, we can arrange for that?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so, sir,
I was gonna let you go, and then I have a request.
you can request first.
So before we go on to preliminary business case 1722, could I get an update on Wareham Retail?
Wait, here, as far as the,
Where are we at with that? Wareham Retail Management.
as far as the dumpsters and
Dumpsters,
the drainage?
The drainage, the erosion.
Yeah, have we heard from them since the letter we sent, or since our meeting with the gentleman on Zoom?
I have not gotten anything.
Okay. And we did give them 30 days, right, to come up with a plan?
And it's coming up on 30 days, I think.
Yeah, probably another week or so. It'll definitely be before our next meeting.
So we should have an answer by the next meeting.
One would think.
Okay. So could we, Monique, have a item to bring that up
Sure.
on the next agenda, please?
Yep, on the next
Is that
agenda.
okay? Is that okay,
That-
Mr. Chairman?
Of course it is.
Thank you.
I'm eager to see that site tidied up as much as anybody. Okay. Moving on to case number 17-22, 65, 69, 73, and 77 Minot Ave, A&R. Applicant Narrows Condominium Trust, care of Beaver Dam Property Management Company Incorporated. Map 44, lots 1010A, 1010B, 1010C, and 1010D. Is there anyone present to speak to this project? Okay, you can join us and give us your presentation on this project, please. Oh, I thought you said someone was raising their hand. So if you're here to speak to this application, please raise your hand and be noticed so that we can bring you in.
Take a look.
Nobody. It seems a little disappointing. I don't know what their intentions were, whether they've just missed the meeting, if they expect us to act on this in their absence.
Well, the state law is clear that you're looking at the right-of-way and the road within it, which is a public way, and the frontage, which is equivalent to or exceeds the zoning requirements. So it is acceptable as an A&R.
It is, but I find it a little bit rude that someone can't even join us to talk to the project. It's like, here's the paperwork, here's your time, go ahead and take care of business while I go off and have dinner with my family.
Well, that's why it's called approval not required, because it doesn't require
Well,
approval.
I had questions for this applicant, because when, I actually had time this week to do some reading, and when I pulled up the property and saw it was next to the school, I started digging around, and I found some articles on the school project that involved historic artifacts that were found on the property.
Oh, yes, that's right. There are some in the frontage of the school property.
Right.
Some of it is off limits because of the historic artifacts.
Right. So where this property is right next door, I would think that that would be a prudent conversation to have. I mean, I can't imagine that the historic artifacts just stop at the property line between the school and this piece of property.
I wouldn't know.
Actually, I was on the school building committee, and I was also on the committee looking at the police and public safety building a bunch of years ago. I think there have been two committees formed since then. Maybe it's only one. But we did a archaeological study when we were looking at the public safety building for up the other side of the school.
Same side of the street, just the other side of the school?
Correct.
Yep.
So it is an area that is known for having artifacts. So I think that's not an unreasonable question.
So, I was gonna say, at this point, can we move forward with this, with a stipulation that nothing be done prior to an archaeological investigation? Or do we put this off until these kind folks can grace us with their presence and discuss this?
I think you can identify this to the Historic Commission and the Massachusetts Historic Commission as an issue that should be considered before development takes place on this property.
Okay. So that answers part of my question. Do we still act on the A&R with that stipulation in place, or do we push the A&R down the road until that takes place?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I believe this application was actually received and stamped in on the 6th, which was just 4 days ago. So I do believe that we're still within the required time frame if you did want to take this up at the meeting on the 25th, or even next week, because I believe we are meeting next week.
Okay, thank you.
So-
We are.
Charlie?
We're meeting next week.
The aspect with respect to archaeological aspects has no bearing on the plan as a Form A.
Right.
It would when it comes to the development of it, and from what I read in the plan, it's set up to be the potential location of 3 duplexes. So if there is any concern about that, when it comes time for a building permit, that would be the time for it to be looked at. Mr. Buckland's right, it's got the proper frontage, it's got the area, and it's on the public way, so that's the only issue. I agree, you have 21 days in which to render a decision. The applicant, his representative, apparently hasn't showed up, so you can table it until next meeting and see what happens in the meantime.
And request that maybe they come by and,
Hopefully they would, and
yeah.
make a presentation on their applicant's behalf.
Just a question through you to Mr. Buckland and Mr. Rowley. In the past, haven't we stamped or on A&Rs added a note that said that we weren't, this did not constitute an approval, that this was a buildable lot? That note is not on this plan. And couldn't we also add a note to the plan saying that there's a potential for historic artifacts, and we haven't made a determination about that? We couldn't add that note.
Personally, I don't think that's appropriate. The first one is.
There are a series of about 4 different notes in the regulations that are required for the plan, and none of those notes are shown on this version of the plan.
So that would be a reason perhaps for deferring a decision anyway, is that?
It's an incomplete plan at this time, yeah.
Then, so, Mr. Chairman, I move, because the plan is incomplete, and the applicant is not here, that we get back to the applicant and have them
Prepare for the next meeting.
prepare for the next meeting.
Okay, we have a motion.
I move that.
Second.
Here we have a motion by Carl Schultz and seconded by Sam Corbett to table this until the meeting of the 25th, which will give the applicant time to correct the plans with the missing notations, and hopefully to come and join us at the meeting to discuss the plan in detail so that we can make an intelligent decision. All in favor? Mike Baptiste.
Aye.
Dan Gleason.
Aye.
Sam Corbett.
Aye.
Carl Schultz.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, 5-0-0. See, I didn't do it that time, Sherry. Getting better.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Massey is here.
Oh, he is? Oh. Can we revisit that just for a second?
Up to you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to revisit that for a second, if you'd like to come forward. You could identify yourself, please?
Anand Massey, Master Millwork.
Okay, thank you for coming in. We got started a little early and brought you right to the top of the agenda so that we could kind of tidy things up. So I want to thank you for coming in and taking the time to talk with us, and also all the hard work and effort that you've put forth over the past 60 days, 90 days, to kind of bring this project back into the good graces of the town as far as the site plan review and the building commissioner and everything else. Monique is going to be sending out a letter of confirmation, but we did vote to accept the performance bond for the vegetation, which will go to you. The letter will go to you telling you that. A copy will be sent to the building commissioner so that he'll have everything that he needs, hopefully, to grant the final certificate of occupancy, and you can get back to business.
Thank you.
So, thank you again for coming in and taking the time and working with Charlie. You know, Charlie, it takes a lot to impress Charlie, and he really spoke very highly about how hard you worked to make this work. So, good job. Thank you very much.
I would like to appreciate the board's forbearance with everything we went through over there, and I apologize for the early missteps. It's not our intention. This town is where we intend to be for a long time, so.
Yeah. Well, sometimes things don't get off to the best start, but, you know, the end result is what matters.
Thank
So,
you.
All right, thank you again. Okay. Continued public hearings. Case number 3-22, 5 Doty Street, site plan review. Applicant Jason St. Martin, map 103, lot 1027, parking lot expansion. If there is someone here to speak to this, could you raise your hand so that we can let you into the meeting?
Hello, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jeff Raff. I represent Shive Hattery and Eversource, and I'm the engineer of record for this project. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can. Thank you for attending tonight.
Oh, you bet. I was here a few weeks ago, and we kind of walked through the plan set and then realized that we had not had Charlie's review and blessing on this project, so we stepped back and had Charlie review it, and we've been working with him for the last couple of weeks to address all of his comments. And I believe you probably received the letter from him today with basically 3 conditions for approval on this. Be happy to walk through the plans again if you'd like, or open it up to questions.
I'm all set as far as the plans. Does anybody else need to review, or?
I'll not rush in, so I'll let anybody.
Don't.
Through you to the planning office, did we get notification? I didn't get a chance. Did we get a notification from Concom on this? This is a site plan review, requires notice from Concom.
I don't believe we got notice from Concom on this one.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what is COMCOM?
Conservation Commission.
Okay.
1551 require, and I was looking, I didn't see a letter from them in the folder.
I didn't see it either.
Okay, 1 second, sorry. Just so that I'm not giving you false information. You are correct. We don't have anything from the Conservation Commission regarding this project.
Yeah, and I expect that all we require is a letter saying that there's no concern, but we should check that box, right?
If we're following the zoning regulations, yeah, we have to do that.
Okay, that, which, you know me, I'd like to follow the regulations, so.
And now we're supposed to have that first, correct?
Before we can close, I was gonna move to close the public hearing,
Right.
but without that document,
Right, it can't be entered.
it can't be entered. I have no questions for the applicant, and I'm satisfied with Mr. Rowley's letter and recommendations, and I would be satisfied as long as Conservation Commission has no concerns, that we're pretty much ready to move ahead, but we can't close the public hearing until we get that artifact.
Right. I have to agree. I'm satisfied with Charlie's review and recommendations as well. The only question I had is the parking of the vehicles is either going to be in new or in good working condition, free of fluid leaks. How does that get policed? I mean, I know,
Are those
It-
employee vehicles or are those?
no, they're line
company
trucks.
vehicles? They're
and-
company vehicles.
Yeah. So,
That-
I bel-
Which means they have a little bit more control over it.
right, well, I just, I haven't gone and seen firsthand, so I'm not gonna jump to judgment, but I do know know the nature of large line trucks and all those hydraulic lines, and there's always something leaking. Always something leaking.
This did come up last time as well, and I think during the review process, Kenneth brought it up as well. This will just be for overflow employee parking. It had come up that line trucks could be parked there, but it was also brought up in the last meeting that, as you well said, the oil and stuff could leak. And keeping it gravel and talking with Charlie, we had to agree that it would only be essentially overflow employee parking and not long-term old line trucks. How you police that, I'm not 100% sure, but Eversource is on board with that as well.
Okay, so could we amend comment number 3 then to reflect that this new parking area is intended for overflow employee parking and not line trucks or other company trucks waiting for any type of repairs? I would assume that those trucks would be kept in the area that you're currently using now?
Yeah, I believe so. And there are some other projects going on for parking lots elsewhere in the Northeast to park some of these line trucks and get them out of these smaller areas.
That was the only thing I had. Sam?
None.
Jane?
No.
Sherry?
Nothing.
Mike?
I do have a question about the Conservation Commission. That conversation did come up with our initial conversation with Ken, and I forget where that went, but I thought there was like a certain distance if we were away from the wetlands that they may not need to be involved in, which is fine if we do need their blessing, but is that something we need to submit as the applicant to the Conservation Commission, or is that something that's handled internally?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the applicant, I believe that the text of the zoning bylaw 1551 says that you're responsible for contacting Mr. Pichette. You're right, there's probably no wetlands consideration at all, and all he needs to do is write a letter to us saying he's reviewed your project and agrees that there's no environmental or wetlands consideration.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes, we may not need it, but we still need, them to essentially verify that. So thank you for that clarification.
I got it right.
We can reach out to them.
1551, that's the right number, right?
Mr. Chairman, I think that if you look at the site plan, I think there is a bordering vegetated wetland that's been identified on the plan, and it's not that far away from the drainage area. So anything that's within 100 feet of a mapped or an identified bordering vegetated wetland requires a notice of intent to conservation.
Okay.
So if they haven't done that process, then they're going to have to go through that.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. I think Mr. Bichette might have been waiting for comments from me with respect to the project as a whole, but that does not relieve the applicant from doing the appropriate either notice of intent or a request for determination of applicability that they do not have to apply. Either case, they need to get to the commission and do that.
All right. Yeah, I see what you're saying, the wetlands,
They may be in the 100-foot no activity zone, which
Right.
is a whole,
which is another whole nother discussion.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so at this point, I would,
I move that we continue this
25th,
at least 2 weeks to the 25th.
25th. That'll give the applicant time to get together with Mr. Pichette and determine whether or not he needs to go further than just a letter stating that there's no concern, or if he needs to get involved and do a study of his own. So with that motion,
I move that we continue 322 5 Doty Street site plan review until 7:25.
Second.
We have a motion by Carl Schultz, seconded by Sam Corbett. Mike Baptiste?
Aye.
Jane Gleason?
Aye.
Sam Corbett?
Aye.
Carl Schultz?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
I don't think I can vote on
You can't vote. She can't vote. I got it right this time, all right? So we will see you on the 25th, after you've gotten together with Dave Burchett at Conservation, and hopefully we can move forward.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Continue public hearing, case number 33-21, 0 Route 25, site plan review. Applicant Wareham PV I LLC, map 115, lot 1000, ground-mounted solar energy generation facility. Is there anyone, if there's anyone here to speak to this project, please raise your hand so that we can bring you into the meeting.
Good evening, Betsy Mason from Clavis Law Group on behalf of Wareham PV1 LLC. And I think joining me remotely, and apologies again, but Sarah Eva from BHB, who usually attends in person, is recovering from COVID. So best wishes to her. But in her place is Chris Wagner from BHB online. And in addition, Mehdi Perry from BHB, who addressed this board last time to discuss the groundwater and hydrology assessment memorandum, which we've since submitted to the board, is here to answer any questions you may have about that memorandum.
Okay, thank you. I think for myself, the first question or concern that I had, it seems to me that the hydrology report submitted is significantly less detailed than the one we received from the Ferring Hills developers team.
Yes, that's correct.
You know, in my humble opinion, I don't think one watershed is any less important than another, and I was just curious why we had such a run-of-the-mill, for the lack of a better way of putting it, non-detailed report presented to us.
I guess, Mehdi, if you are on the line.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. I believe that the report that we submitted for this project is the appropriate level of detail given the issues at hand, and also in the context of having reviewed the Fearing Hill report. In some ways, the sites are very similar geology and soil materials and hydrology characteristics, although the site that we're talking about tonight would have generally less impact to groundwater due to less acreage of tree clearing significantly. We'd be looking at about 14 acres here at the 0 Route 25 project versus about 26.5 acres at the other. But beyond that, a few other distinctions. At the Fearing Hill site in particular, there were particularized concerns with respect to septic systems, which were described in the Fearing Hill report, that had fairly marginal conditions with a high water table at the septic systems. So there was a particular concern about raising the water table near these marginal septic systems. There is not such a situation at the 0 Route 25 project site, where down gradient of the project, where the groundwater elevations might change, is undeveloped land as far as the receiving waters, the bogs and the streams. Also, just having the Fearing Hill report for context, what we found is their ultimate conclusion after doing some very extensive study that ultimately they predicted in a worst case scenario, a 100-year storm, there would be less than a 2-inch rise in groundwater levels at that site. And I think in hindsight, once it's known that that whole project would have less than a 2-inch change to groundwater levels, I think that puts it into perspective that that exhaustive level of study was probably more than was needed given the magnitude of impacts that are actually ended up being predicted. So again, contrasting this site to Fearing Hill, where given some of the site differences, there would be even smaller magnitude of rise in groundwater level and an absence of this particular concern of marginal septic systems down gradient. I don't think it's necessary or justified to repeat that level of a study. And so we did a level of detail and study that still goes above and beyond any other solar project I've worked on, and we've done about 80 out of this office. I think it's the right level of detail for the concerns and for the site we have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input. For just as far as the level of detail requested, this project compared to any other, that could very well be. But at the end of the day, it's still our groundwater that we're looking after. So we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by the townspeople, because they're the ones that have to live with any potential issue should it arise. Questions from the board? Mr. Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. King. Through you to the applicant. Building on Mr. King's questions, just some clarifying questions. I read, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. If I read your report, another difference that I read in your report from Fearing Hill, through your site mapping, the groundwater is substantially deeper on your site, right? I think the highest was like 4 feet below ground. Was that the closest it came to the surface?
Yeah, in the test pits that we had dug back in April, about 4 feet is correct. I think the highest, we want to be absolutely precise, was 44 inches. So yeah, a few inches shy of 4 feet.
Right, okay. So great. I read the report, and that's what I came away with. The next question, I noted that you made I believe, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, that you made a statement that there were established that there are no appreciable pollutant runoffs from panels. I believe you made that statement. Is that correct?
I do want to just check. I know we did have a question from the public at the last hearing about the PFAS, PFAS.
PFAS, yes. And I think you made sort of a generic statement, because I was going to follow up with that and say, can you certify that there are no PFAS in your panels?
Betsy Mason, if I may, we actually, Mr. Perry did not, that may be in his report, but I actually provided a response to Mr. Buckland regarding that question. And we have confirmed with First Solar Incorporated, which is the manufacturer of the solar panels we plan to use for the project, that their panels do not contain any PFAS.
Thank you for that, Ms. Mason. I missed that in the documents, and I'll go look for it. But thank you for that confirmation. My last question, Mr. King, through you to the planning office. We got a letter from Mr. Sullivan, I think late today, which I didn't understand, but he was asking for similar level of hydrogeologic study. Do you believe we've met his request, or Can you speak to that?
That was actually an older memo that had been submitted previously.
Oh, I only remember.
And that was
the-
part of the reason why they had VHB come out with their hydrogeologist to do the site assessment. I think it is an appropriate level of analysis for the site, given the resources that are at risk and the potential impacts from the changes.
Okay, so you think we've met Mr. Sullivan's request?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I also noted, this is just a note, that I was unaware that we had actually had a spill on the town property previously, so that was a concern, but that's just a note that I learned. But thank you. Those were my questions regarding the hydrogeologic survey.
You're welcome.
Questions from anyone? Sharon?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding, I think from a previous inquiry that you made with town council, is that the existence of an investigation, if any, has no bearing on what we're doing here. Am I remembering that correctly?
I did not get to speak with town council one-on-one on that subject, but I did notice that he sent a letter stating that there is no active targeted site, I think is what he referred to it as, for unauthorized soil removal. So as far as the town's concerned, based on his letter, if I understand it correctly, there is no investigation.
I understood it a little differently.
Okay, I would love you to clarify it.
Well, what I understood him to be saying is there is no targeted investigation, but it is a site that is under review, as a number of others are. I think it would be good for us to have some information on whether that has anything to do with what we're doing here. I mean, it doesn't strike me necessarily that it does, but I would love to be enlightened on that point.
Betsy Mason, if I may, to the board. I believe that we had previously addressed this, and I know that Mr. Fletcher, the property owner, appeared at the last hearing and addressed this, and strongly suggested that the board speak with town council and town administrator regarding the fact that Mr. Fletcher's property, this property in particular, will not be the subject of any investigation. I would suggest, again, if you've not spoken with town administrator and town council specifically about Mr. Fletcher and this property and the fact that it will not be under investigation, that once you do, you will be satisfied that that is in fact the case.
I want to clarify something that she said there, was that there will be no attempt to have an investigation of the site, and that is incorrect. Mr. Fletcher had identified that he had removed 80 to 100,000 yards of material from the property. That is what the part of the information that was being considered on all the properties in town as to the movement of earth and soil material and the potential fees that go along with that have to be paid. There still could be an investigation of this property, but it would not affect the special permit that is issued by the board for this property. The sign-off, the bylaw that is in place that says that taxes have to be paid before a special permit or a permit can be issued by a town board only applies to taxes, excise taxes, and not to penalties that could be applied to the property.
Unpaid fees?
Yeah, it would not apply to the unpaid fees.
Well, see, I interpret that different. I
This
interpret an
came from
unpaid
town
fee
meeting.
as an unpaid tax.
This came
Betsy
from town
Mason, if I
meeting.
may.
No,
I-
one moment, Betsy, please.
Sure.
It did come up at town meeting because there was a question about,
There's been a commissioner appointed to investigate it. It's town-wide, not just this
Not
particular.
just this property.
It's,
I think you're mixing two questions. I agree that at a town meeting, the townwide review, I think what Mr. Buckland was specifically speaking to is the bylaw for, or the application process. I don't know if it's a bylaw, it's certainly the application process that requires a statement from the tax collector saying
That the taxes have been
the taxes have been paid. And I actually met with Mr. Buckland about this to clarify it, and I was gonna bring this up when we review our process. I think that the scope of that in the future needs to be expanded to include fees, liens, penalties, whatever, but that's future.
Well, just to make sure it's clear that there are no penalties or fees that have been attached to this property as yet. It's
Right.
still in
That's a
process.
future
I
potential.
have a quick question. Is there any possibility that the correction for work that was done there improperly, unpermitted or whatever, that the end result is going to be restoration of the site? Or is it just going to be an exchange of money?
I don't know what the resolution is of the site.
I guess the question is whether there's a possibility, because if a project is going to go forward, then restoration of the site is not going to happen. Is that something that the town would ever look to have happen if there was?
I don't believe so. The article was about collecting fees for soil that was removed that weren't paid. And they were specifically looking at ADM, but they basically passed town meeting across the board to check all sites that were mined previously. They only can take out a certain amount, and a lot of material has been allegedly taken out above that, and there were no fees paid. I think
It's 25 cents a
25
cubic yard.
cents. Yeah.
So it was strictly about the payment of fees and the
there would be no
acquiring
restoration.
of the proper permitting.
Right.
It would not be about restoration.
My understanding is the article had nothing to do with restoration at all. It was strictly fees for the already just taken out.
This particular subject is troubling. Because, it's kind of like giving someone a building permit to put a house up on a lot that has back taxes. Call it a tax or a fee. You can put any name you want on it.
Well, there is no, there's no penalty or fee attached to this as yet.
Right.
Right. But we've
Betsy
had the
Mason, if I may.
we've had the applicant in front of us sit there in that chair right there and tell us that he took 80 to 100,000 yards of material out of there.
That's right.
So, no permit, no fees paid to the town.
I don't know if that's the case or not.
Well, we know that he hasn't paid fees to the town. We've already determined that. That question doesn't need to be addressed anymore. We know the answer. Would it be, not that I'm saying that barring this, I would vote to approve. Charlie, I'm going to ask you this because you're the smartest guy in the room. Barring anything else, just the subject of the may or may not be unpaid fees and litigation or investigation that may or may not happen, can we condition this with a bond to cover the value of what could be the unpaid fees for a period of time until the town council and whoever involved says everything's good, he's in the clear, or no, he owes us money?
You're asking a non-lawyer. The only thing I can point to is section 1216 of the zoning bylaw, which says there are exemptions, and the last one is, section 12, by the way, has to do with the soil removal that you're all talking about right now. 1216.9 says the following: construction of structures, roadways, parking lots, associated activities for residential or non-residential structures or uses in receipt of a special permit from the Board of Appeals or Planning Board is exempt. Article 12. So whether or not there's something outstanding with respect to the soil removal, I think personally, and all I can speak of is personally, I think is irrelevant to this proceeding. If it's
Okay.
something that the town wants to take up, I think it could, but that's up to them, and I don't think it has any place in the application of the site plan review portion of the bylaw.
Okay. So if they decide, Mr. Fletcher's going to retain ownership of the property, correct? This array is just being placed on leased property, Ms. Mason?
Yes, that's correct.
So he still runs the risk of having some
Right.
sort of an attachment on his property.
It's his risk.
Right. Okay,
I have two questions.
please, go ahead.
Is there anything that has to be done considering the crossing town property? In regard to this site? I mean, have to cross town property to get to it. Is there anything that we need for protection from them doing something to that area that either we don't agree with or is dangerous?
As far as like tearing up the right of way to.
Right, exactly.
To put in the transmission lines or
Right.
any other type of
I mean,
utility.
you can't just cross town property because you want to. There's got to be some protection for the town.
There's an easement in place.
I'm sorry?
There's an easement in place
But that
that
doesn't-
allows that
doesn't-
access and utilities to cross it.
There is.
Yeah, there is.
Now, did we determine that they're the only utility that's going to be buried in that road and that we're not going to have two sets of high voltage transmission lines buried in that road?
There was information that was provided by Betsy Mason today that identifies the transmission lines in the area. And I don't
What's that
believe
mean?
that there's, that the area is laced with transmission lines.
Betsy Mason, if I may.
Yes, ma'am?
Thank you. Yes, I apologize to the board, as I did to Mr. Buckland, for submitting something so late, but Mr. Buckland asked for something in writing today. Meaning me, I discussed it last time, but provided information today from Eversource indicating that essentially any electric line, it would not actually be a transmission line, it would just be an electric distribution line going into the project site through the easement would simply be a 22.8 kV line, which is the same rating line that runs the entire length of Charge Pond Road, the same rating line that serves the municipal maintenance facility, the shore crane facility, several cranberry bogs, farther north on Charge Pond Road, as well as several residences. So I can speak to that in more detail or share figures, but basically the point of this brief memo responding to Mr. Buckland's question is that it's Eversource's job to decide what constitutes necessary utilities for any development in its service area. And it provides information on its website on a particular page called the Hosting Capacity Map and Interconnection Analysis Portal. And you or I or anybody else can go to that page and see the level of power lines going into any development. And it's clear there that regardless of what's built on Mr. Fletcher's property, whether it's a cranberry operation, if it needs a building, a commercial facility like the shore crane facility, a municipal facility like the municipal maintenance facility, a house like those further north on Charge Pond Road, or a large-scale ground-mounted solar installation like the Blue Wave project. Well, each of the four projects, but I've included a figure of the one facility closest to the project site, the one we've been comparing this project to. That too has a 22.8 kV line. That's as much as Eversource would run into this property. So as much as it runs into any other developed parcel on the site. So perhaps that's a lengthier explanation than you wished.
Well,
but,
yeah, thank you. That addresses your project. My question was, is there multiple lines on that same easement?
No, to my understanding, there are no other utility lines in the easement right now, although it is true that other holders of the access easement, which goes from Charge Pond Road across town property, across Mr. Fletcher's parcel, and then continues to the east and then to the northeast, Each of those property owners has the right to install utilities. Nobody has since 1966, I believe is the year the order of taking was executed. So power lines would be the only lines going in. I think the board discussed last time, making room for another set of lines to come in there if somebody else wants them, so the road doesn't have to be torn up twice. Or something that we've definitely done on other projects, and which was done among the 4 Blue Wave projects to the east, and that is just something we're going to have to do anyway. An agreement among the affected access easement holders, which here would just be, I guess would be everybody who would be accessing their properties from Charge Pond Road. Just a written agreement saying, setting out the construction schedule, and guaranteeing that there will be no major disruption to anybody's use of the access road, nor will there be any any damage that's not restored. Something along those lines that basically says we will be, when we're constructing the utility line in the access roadway, we will do it properly in accordance with all required standard safety practices, et cetera. And in using the access easement, we're just going to drive a truck up and down it occasionally to have maintenance folks check in on the facility.
Okay, thank you. Sam?
Certainly.
Last question is, what kind of site work is being done there now?
We're not doing any site work there now.
I mean, there's been heavy equipment all over the property. I was there Saturday and Sunday. I crossed the property on the hill to get to Surecurrent, where my dog goes for a swim. And there's been a lot of work done there. I'm not sure what it was.
I don't believe there's any work ongoing on Mr. Fletcher's property at the moment. I know that one of the northern neighbors is doing something, but I can't really speak to that.
Okay, there is work being done there right now. I don't know what it is. I'm implying anything. I know I was there. There's heavy equipment that moved a lot of material around. I just didn't know what was going on.
This is Haley at Long Road. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I just wanted to add that I know David Fletcher, certainly no work is being done related to this project or, related to Long Road, but David Fletcher, as the owner, he did mention to me he's moved some dirt around, something about I guess it's the site has been used, I don't know by who, but by some dirt bikes. And so he said, I guess to try to stop maybe some dirt bikes using the property that he, doesn't want there, he's moved some dirt around to try to, make it less appealing to dirt bikes. That's the only bit of news I had heard recently from David, but certainly nothing related to us.
Okay. To the planning office, do we have a copy of the document that Betsy Mason referred to as far as the panels that they're planning on using, not exuding PFAS?
Surrounding PFAS, it was just an email that we received, and it was talking about, I think, maybe 4 or 5 different things. So I'm happy to upload that.
So, but we don't have any kind of a document from the manufacturer of the panels they're planning on using that states that there are no PFAS issues.
Correct. The only thing I have is just a statement from
From the
Ms.
applicant?
Betsy. Yes.
Okay.
We can get that for you guys, certainly, from First Solar.
Yeah, I would, for my own comfort level, I would think I would want to see that directly from the manufacturer rather than taking it at face value from an email.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that should be policy from here on forward.
Oh, yeah, for any solar project, yeah.
And we should make that known to them as far as the process. This is something we require.
Yeah. Questions?
Yeah, the last time we met, we talked about the buffer at the, I guess it's the west property line that abuts the town property that's within residential district. And I'm just wondering if anything has changed on the site plan.
Betsy Mason, if I can respond to the chair. We and you have sort of gone back and forth on this issue quite a bit, and rather than continue to beat a dead horse, as it were, we will be applying to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance from the provisions of the solar bylaws that relate to the requirement for a minimum 50-foot setback and vegetated buffer around all four boundaries of the site.
I'm not sure exactly where the property line is, but that side of it is a cliff. I don't know exactly where the line is, if he owns up to the edge or where it
deeper in.
ends.
Yeah.
It's 100 feet. They can't buffer there. I mean, I don't know what you can buffer from a cliff. I mean, you go to the edge of the property, you can see the entire piece in front of you.
And that's why it's appropriate to go for a variance due to lot shape factor. We can't grant the variance,
Right.
and we can't waive the requirement. I do believe we can condition the site plan, or does the site plan now have to move to the ZBA? Through you to Mr. Buckland.
You couldn't issue a site plan review special permit in conformance with zoning because it wouldn't be in conformance with zoning if it needed the variance. It would probably need the variance first before you could issue the special permit.
Or we could send the whole special permit to the ZBA.
No, they won't take the whole thing now because you've been running the special permit up to this point. What they'll do is they'll just take the variance and
then
make an
send
opinion
them
on that and then send it back.
All right, so, okay, so that,
Yep.
we can't close the public hearing.
I wasn't going to anyway till we had that document.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else, Jane?
No, that was my main.
Jerry?
Nope, Jane stole my question.
She's, Michael? Sam? Carl?
Everything's been answered.
No, excuse me, I think the applicant is handling the issue that we've identified about the buffer in the proper way, and that's the way it should be done.
So I would entertain a motion to continue the public hearing. Well, if we move it to the 25th, will that give the ZBA enough time to get it on their agenda, or do we have to go further out?
It'll go further out. It's going to take at least a month to get a public hearing.
With the ZBA?
Yeah.
Okay, so Monique, what's our first available date in,
August.
well, yeah, I was gonna say the middle of August, maybe the second meeting in August?
It looks like August 15th for the planning board, and hopefully, I still don't even think that it'll be ready for advertising, so I would move,
What's
I
the
guess-
next one?
if you're, you guys are second and
Monday
fourth,
in
right?
August.
The 22nd
haven't.
actually is the fourth Monday in August.
So that'll,
So
that
that should be enough time.
I say that should give ZBA enough time to post it, have the hearing, act on it, and then bring it back to us.
In theory, yes.
Okay? So, Ms. Mason, does that sound reasonable to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion.
Actually, may I interrupt, sir? I apologize. I just had
Sure.
one question that was sort of trying to tie up loose ends here. We had submitted a revised decommissioning plan to address certain comments from Mr. Schultz and perhaps other board members. And we were just wondering if you've had an opportunity to review that revised plan yet, decommissioning plan, and determine whether or not it addresses the questions that were raised. I think which primarily had to do with salvage value.
I don't even have that on the documents for this project. Is that something that hasn't been uploaded yet?
There should be a plan set located on the site. I think you have it right in front of you.
Yeah.
This is a
I was
decommissioning
looking
plan
for
that
it
was part of, I
electronically.
believe, part of the original site plan review application, and then we updated it.
I remember the discussion, and I was anxiously awaiting that. If it's there, I didn't see it. The
Yes, I
O&M plan.
believe we submitted a letter prior to the, okay, June 9th, in response to the board's previous comments. A June 9th letter in advance of the June 13th public hearing that addressed a number of issues, including the revised decommissioning plan. So it's a 73-page letter from BHP to the board. And a portion of that length is addressed to the revised decommissioning plan.
So, just for through you, Mr. Chairman, to the town office and Ms. Mason, I'm looking at the artifact list that the planning office has provided me. There's a 5/16 applicant letter. There's a 6/27 letter to the planning board from Conservation Commission, which meets that requirement. There's a 7/5 hydrology report. There's a 7/11 memo from the town administrator. And then there's a 7/11 memo from the applicant. Was that the one you're talking about, the one that came in yesterday?
No, this was one that was sent on June 9th, which I believe was a Thursday. And this was a letter that also included as attachments the order of taking and limited access plan layout for the access easement.
Okay. So thank you, Ms. Mason. I don't see that on the site or the materials that I remember reviewing.
Okay.
But
I
if
can
it's
send
there, I
another
will
copy.
review it, I
Say,
promise.
if we can get it uploaded to the site, that'll give us
Sure.
time to review it, because
Right.
I don't believe I've seen it either, to be honest.
Yeah, I know Betsy, someone from your office did come by and they dropped off materials, which the board does have.
Is it paper? Should I go be looking for?
No, I also, and I can double check.
Would you
I know I sent it. I can send, I'll resend you the
Please.
email by
I
which
don't
I
have
sent
that.
it.
That would be
It was
wonderful. I would
late on a
appreciate that.
Thursday afternoon, so that might be part of the issue. But yes, it was definitely sent because.
Okay,
So-
Ms. Mason, Mr. Rowley has a paper copy, so it
Okay.
perhaps was in a package that I got from Monique and I missed it.
Okay.
But it clearly, the headings, as you said, clearly address my question. So I'll read that and make sure make sure that it addressed my questions, which was really
Okay,
about
and-
the salvage value
Yes.
and the process.
And I'll forward another copy of the letter itself in PDF format to Ms. Baldwin so that it can go up on the website.
Yeah.
Please, and then the updated site plan as well, because I did print, well, I mean, I had those that were delivered from the board. And then I do have Mr. Rowley's report.
Great, okay. Yes,
So
definitely.
just those two items, please, and then I can post them online. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You're welcome.
Anything else, Mr. Schultz?
No, I thank Ms. Mason for providing this. It looks like you've addressed my questions just on a quick scan.
Good.
Okay, so, entertain a motion to continue the public hearing on Zero Route 25 site plan review to the planning board meeting of August 24th with the anticipation that some documentation, namely the PFAS document,
August 22nd.
22nd, okay. The PFAS document, the decommissioning report that I'd like to see, because I haven't, and then their, hopefully their presence in front of the ZBA, and give them enough time to act, and then bring back to us what the ZBA's decision was. So,
Motion,
it's a little too late, Annie, I'm sorry, we've already,
She did have her hand up.
okay. Right, well, yeah, we'll redo it.
Are we okay? Thank you very much for the PFAS certification. I'm very glad about that. These, through you to the proponent, my understanding is that these are first solar cadmium telluride thin film panels. Is that correct?
They are first solar panels. I cannot speak to the exact composition.
To be honest, and not to interrupt, but if we're requesting them to supply us with documentation from the manufacturer concerning the panel and the possibility of PFAS, any discussion prior to that really is going to be useless.
It's not PFAS, it's cadmium telluride.
But they're going to supply it. Ms. Mason, are you going to supply us with the technical information concerning the intended panel? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Cosgrove looked it up, and this is what they are in the documentation.
Oh, we don't have it.
Oh, you haven't seen it? It's online.
No, that's what we're it's not with the documents for the project. So
Okay.
once we get the documents, we'll be able to review it.
So next hearing.
I'll be here. I'll be easy to find. I'm the good-looking guy in the middle.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Hayes, Ms. Hayes, are you going to bring up at the next hearing that you believe that there will be a potential for groundwater pollution of cadmium? Through you to Ms. Mason, if your certification, in addition to PFAS, you could address any cadmium leaching from the panels, that would be useful.
That would be very useful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So move the motion.
Move the motion to continue the public hearing until 8:22. Okay. The folks that are online, we'll do them one at a time.
Hello?
Jerry Cosgrove.
Okay, if you could identify yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Barry Cosgrove.
Welcome, Mr. Cosgrove.
Thank you very much for permitting me to speak, and thank you for the service to the town. I'll try to go very, very quickly. On the issue of the investigation, counsel for the applicant and the property owner continues to try to tell you there's no investigation today, tomorrow, or the next day. I'd ask you to kindly look at your planning documents posted on site today. Was a memo from the town administrator which was written the morning after your last meeting, where the representation was made that there's no investigation, and in fact there is. To the statement that the article in town related only to the payment of fees, that's false. I wrote it. It calls for the enforcement of the earth removal bylaw, which includes restoration. That question was asked about restoration is exactly the point. It is incorrect. It is false to say otherwise. On the issue of fees, there's a clear implication that fees would be the same as taxes. On the issue of 80,000 yards to 100,000 yards, I don't know if any of you are good at math. I'm sure you're better than me, but you've got a site of 14 acres that's been removed with a hill going from 50 feet down to 20 feet. You don't have to go to MIT to figure out that's a lot more than 80,000 to 100,000 cubic yards. On the point made by Mr. Rowley that there's an exception under the earth removal bylaw, false, incorrect. You need to read it again, read it carefully. It won't take long. The very first sentence says that the exception applies to moving, not removing soil. Repeat, moving, not removing soil. On the issue of the groundwater report, the memo submitted by the administrator certainly seems to suggest that the board should have the type of robust, independent study, not a study done by somebody out of state, at a desk, never been to the site, who has a pecuniary interest on behalf of their client and the outcome. I'd point out that there was grossly insufficient historical data provided. I'll point out that the test pits and borings, which are explicitly called for in the direction to the body, have not been done. They did a couple of test borings for depths just down on one end where the a runoff was going to be performed. The gentleman made the point that there's a difference between this site and the other site because it's 14 acres versus 26 acres. That's a math error as well. You got to add all of the removal of the trees. You get to about 26. And I'll point out the idea that somebody would look at another study down the street, across town to be more accurate, and say, well, they did a CT, they did an MRI, and the patient was fine. Therefore, why should we do the same comprehensive testing on a totally different patient? It's absolutely illogical. It is not an independent study. It is not robust, and it's not what was called for. On the issue of the conservation, and that being done not so fast, there is an open and pending complaint for wetland violations on this site, which, just like the review under the earth removal bylaw, could result in restoration of the project. If there has to be restoration, it obviously would be disruptive to have a site plan review saying you do one thing and another body in town saying you should do another. On the issue of the right-of-way, the right-of-way is not determined by what one side says it is. It's not determined by what one side says it is. It's determined by an expert, independent evaluation. On the issue of the PFAS, you've covered it. The decommission, you've covered it. We've not talked about transformers, but I think there's a whole other issue here that's yet to be addressed. These are often termed battery bombs. They're located right next to high-value employees and assets of the town. The DPW should be fully aware and engaged in this. So I'm sorry, but the number of incorrect statements in the last hour is disturbing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cosgrove. We appreciate your comments and concern. There was somebody else? They just left? Okay. So no hands? Okay, I will re-entertain the motion to move this to the planning board meeting of 8/22.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Sam Corbett, seconded by Mike Baptiste. All those in favor? Sherry can vote on moving the meeting, right? We're not acting on the actual...
No, it's a non...
I'm trying, Sherry. I'm trying to get you in there.
Thank you.
I'm working it. All those in favor of moving the meeting to 8/22? Mike Baptiste?
Aye.
Jane Gleason?
Aye.
Sam Corbett?
Aye.
Carl Schultz?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, 5-0-0.
It's a good thing I'm not paid by the vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. In other business, let's take it out of order and knock out meeting minutes approval for June 13, 2022.
Sure, we could do that.
I was just gonna say, I haven't received them.
Yes. We are
Oh,
just gonna
that's-
go through. Jay.
That's not
No?
good.
Oh,
Anybody that knows me will tell you I hate last minute,
oh, I'm so
like with a
sorry.
passion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm sorry?
Thursday at noon.
Okay, deal. Sounds good.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable reading that on the screen and then,
Yeah, I know that Jane just had some minor, like, one word here, two word there, and I'll definitely get those to you ahead of time in the future.
Thank
That way
you.
you have time to review them.
all right, so much for knocking that out. Well, we did knock it out, just not in the right way. Huh? Okay. Article discussions. Article 6, density and dimensional regulations, stormwater bylaws, and MS4, and other articles. Where do we want to start?
Just that the Board of Appeals is going to discuss Article 6 and the dimensional changes at their meeting on Wednesday. So you may get some kind of input from there. I expect that what they'll be asking for is more substantial changes in the bylaw than what's been done, but we're not ready for that. There's enough to do with the corrections as is.
Yeah, it seems that, I mean, the intent of these changes was just to clean it up so that it's legible. But they're not substantive. I think we need some time. I think that substantive changes are probably in order, but I think that they need due consideration, put it that way.
Absolutely.
And my cleaning them up is not due consideration in my book, and I'm sure many other people's books.
So, Mr. Chairman, perhaps before we do a dive into each of the proposed changes, because Article 15 also probably needs some substantive changes. Article 14 did get some substantive changes, right?
That's right.
Let's discuss how we want to approach this, because we have probably until when to close out on anything we're going to get to town meeting. How many weeks do we have?
You probably have about 8 weeks.
Yikes.
So a process, and then we had at one point discussed a priority or an importance, because the subdivision and the subdivision rules and regs were somewhat substantive. There was some clarification, but there were
substantive issues in there too.
Yeah, there were some substantive issues in there too. So there's a lot of reading and thought and discussion that. So I want to discuss how do we want to approach achieving our goal. I think for sure we need to get Articles 14, 15 in front of town meeting. Article 6.
Well, does it make sense to, and I have no idea the process, but to convene a committee, put together a committee
Or workshop.
to do exactly this? And
Article 15, we already had a committee.
Okay,
The subdivision rules and regs, we already had a committee.
okay.
Can we just schedule a public workshop without public comment and take them one at a time? Don't muddy the whole meeting with a bunch of stuff. Let's just say, all right, we're gonna work on X and spend 2 hours on it.
That would work for me, but then the presumption would be everybody needs to come to that meeting having already
Read through it.
processed and digested
Right.
the material. And
We could do that if I know that in 2 weeks we're gonna discuss in detail Article 6.
so why don't we map out a schedule that says, on this date, we're going to spend 2 hours and go through this. And on this date, we're going to spend 2 hours and go through this. That would help everybody prepare and be ready.
I agree.
And if it can be divided into manageable pieces.
Well, probably only do one.
I mean, we
one per
might
meeting.
even
One per
need
meeting.
more than one
Carl,
night
isn't
to
15
do-
done?
15 is almost done. If you read the document you've got, it's got some edits remaining in it.
Not that many, though.
Not that many. I also have been going through and continuing past the work that Richard was doing and pointing out some places for further clarification, which I would be glad to continue to do. But, yeah, so it's nearly done.
Yeah.
So, but it needs
Yeah,
to
we
be
figured we had
read.
another hour and we could finish it.
So let's put that on the first, let's make that first.
To me, it's the easiest of the three
Or
of
the
them.
subdivision is pretty much also done. Subdivision rules and regs is
Okay.
also, I mean, we the three of us worked on that.
Not to belabor this or to make it more complicated, but personally, I find it's useful to have a conversation and then for me to go away and think about what was discussed. I want to hear what other people think, what the rest of the board thinks, and then
That's why I
be able
said,
to stew on it.
how,
and-
how should we approach this? So that we all,
I mean,
How about, I don't want to get yelled at. How about if we approach each meeting in two parts? So the first part is on the first meeting, we take Article 15 for argument's sake, and we spend an hour or an hour and a half, or whatever it is, and we discuss it. And we bounce ideas off one another. And then we take that information and we move that to the second half of the next meeting. And the first half of the next meeting is the same process of having an open discussion,
Sort
but
of a
on a different
leapfrog.
article.
sort of a leapfrog.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
So
I think
setting
it
the
would be-
priorities is important then. What's the priorities for the articles then?
I'm sorry if I could just interject a thought, and sorry to do this, but it would be really helpful to me if for each article we could describe what problem or problems we're trying to solve, sort of what the perspective of the person who was doing the revisions was, so that we can read it and provide some guidance on whether that problem has been solved, or whatever the goal of the drafters were, whether that's been achieved or not.
I think it's the three C's, coherence, consistency, and clarity of the bylaws is what's needed in a lot of cases.
And I understand that, but in maybe a little bit more detail as to what inconsistencies and lack of cohesiveness, or, yes, cohesiveness there is.
You know, basically what prompted the revision.
Yeah, and it's the frustration of trying to read it as it is.
But 9 times out of 10, when we attack a zoning issue, it's because of an event.
Yeah, and we want to think about events that may happen as a result of the bylaw, the way it's written.
Or what has happened. That's
Or what has
prompted
happened.
us to look at that zoning bylaw.
but, okay, and you're absolutely right. So, for example, the rewrite of the solar bylaw was prompted by learnings, plus the fact that the AG rejected our first attempt. But I would suggest that the work that we started on Article 15 last fall was because the article didn't make sense anymore. The numberings were wrong, the cross-references in the docket. So that started as a just coherent, I think you used coherence was one of your C's.
Yeah,
I was looking for a smile, but
yeah.
Appearance, cohesiveness, whatever.
yes. So that's where we started with Article 15, and then as we were doing that, there were a couple of places where we did exactly that. Well, what problems have we had? Oh, well, it's not clear in the wording. Maybe we could improve it by this. And as we've heard from some of our recent cases, we have definitional problems, so that we can work to improve what's the definition of a district, what's the definition of move versus remove.
There were also in Article 15, there were a lot of things that should have been in the regulations rather than in the bylaw. That they were management issues or procedural issues that should be in the rules and regulations rather than in the bylaw itself.
Right, and I don't think in the package that Monique sent us, the draft rules and regulations for site plan were distributed.
No, and it should be. That should be part of the
There is,
package.
we were also working, much like there's a subdivision rules and regulations document, we were preparing a site plan rules and regulations document, but that hasn't been distributed yet. And Monique, if you don't have that, I have a copy of that.
Please send it to me, thank you.
But there's a lot of work, and it's similar. We did exactly the same approach for subdivision. There were,
We've got an existing bylaw that's been redlined, things we wanted to change. We've got a revised bylaw that is ready to go. So it would do exactly what Sherry has suggested we do. All we gotta do is take the time to go through that. And Carl and I can point out those places where we suggested those changes and the changes we made for your consideration. It's ready to go.
So let's fire the first shot. Let's start off with Article 15. That seems to be the closest to completion. You know, small victories keep the creative juices flowing. So we
Okay.
just need a
Well, let's
date.
come up with a schedule, as you said, and I'm okay with the leapfrogging if that addresses Jane's thought about how she can best process the input. That's okay with me. Leapfrogging
so-
is fine.
So it sounds like if we start off with Article 15, we could probably schedule a light meeting. You know, because all we're gonna be doing in that meeting is just going through it and bouncing ideas off of one another. We're not gonna have the second half, which we'll have for a follow-up meeting.
I would think that you want to end that meeting with Article 6 then, and go through Article 6 and confirm that your agreement with the changes that are made.
No,
Well, it would follow.
Because you've already
that-
gone through Article 6 already.
It would follow that leapfrogging pattern. We've already done Article 6, and if
Okay.
we do the sort of
So
follow-up
if we
on
can-
6,
yeah,
so early, the intensive on 15, and
and then the
follow-up
follow-up on 6. Okay, so we need a date.
Well, can we get all 4 dates on the calendar?
Sure try. I'm okay with that.
Did you say we're meeting next week? That was a
Yes.
surprise to me.
That was the workshop regarding the articles that we had established.
Do we have it on the calendar?
18.
I know we talked about it.
So that would be our first date then?
That could be. What's the date
18th.
The 18th.
of July? July.
Correct.
We're in
Next week.
July, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me look at my calendar.
I called Monique on it, and that's what we voted on.
Okay, how about that? It's actually on my calendar.
How'd that happen?
Actually, I was confused with all the dates we were adding, so I called Monique and tried to get it all done and on my calendar.
Hey, it's on mine too. Off-cycle meeting, 6 PM, zoning articles. All right, so let's put it on for Article 15 for
So
a deep discussion
we'll-
and Article 6 for review.
Okay. So then our agreement is everybody's going, to and I'll send you the rules and regs
Please.
for Article 15.
Yeah, if you could
Okay.
distribute
We're
those.
going to do 15, then 8, and then 6.
15 and 6.
And the goal was to have, obviously zoning board is meeting on Wednesday, so hopefully we'll have some feedback from them to discuss on the 18th, as well as the building commissioner, a memo of some sort, or maybe he'll appear in person, who knows. But Article 6 was supposed to be up for discussion on the 18th.
Okay.
And then, Ken, the only thing we absolutely have to do for town meeting is the MS4. We have to get those regs straightened out, right?
Well, we don't have to unless we want to get in trouble with the EPA.
So the only one that has a sort of a sword hanging over our heads is that one.
Yes, essentially there's a federal requirement that we get something done on MS4. And it's not just the bylaws, it's the cleaning of basins and the mapping of drainage ways and the cleaning of, sweeping of streets, a whole series of actions that have to take place. This is just one part of that program. It's amazing to me how much effort has to be put into this when we're confronted with so many other issues in the town of this size and this budget. The complexity of problems we have to deal with, and we have to put our effort into the
And it gets-
MS4 program.
And it gets worse with every passing day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the importance of fixing the LIP program? Are we at Safe Harbor yet?
No, we will be though soon. There's a couple of things going on where the permits being issued are going to cover us, and we're going to be protected pretty soon.
And if we could count Royal Crest, that'll
That'll put us over the top easy, yeah.
okay. We'll talk about that tomorrow.
Right.
Are you going to be able to come
Yeah, I'll be
tomorrow?
able to come to that.
Okay.
All right, so we've at least got the 18th on the
Right,
calendar.
we've got it started.
Mike,
Sir?
could I step back to the MS4 for just a minute?
Sure.
Ken, what portion of the whole MS4 program is something that the planning board can do? Basically, isn't it the rules and regulations and the zoning bylaw and the relationship of those two documents with respect to MS4? Because isn't everything else sort of a town requirement that does not involve those two activities?
That's right. Only some of the bylaws have to be on the stormwater management planning that we do and the procedures that are followed by the other departments. But I think we already passed a stormwater planning bylaw, as well as an illicit discharge bylaw as well too. So we're pretty much covered on that aspects of it. This is really the zoning bylaws and the rules and regulations that we have to get in play. And I think I sent around to you the list of questions that we have to answer, and I can do that as well too, and not just give you the questions, but give you the answers as well.
That makes it easy.
Yeah. When's the
Ken-
test?
Ken, is your memo, I mean, I read it as sort of a how-to guide for how we get from where we are now to where we need to be.
That's right.
And it seemed, this may be overly optimistic, but it seemed kind of doable.
Yeah, I think it is as well too. It's something that we can do. It's just that it takes time and a thought, and we have to figure out what we have to, how we actually comply with the bylaw requirements.
So, but we did discuss taking the opportunity to update the stormwater bylaw to talk about more current.
I'd like to have it as a priority, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, because we need to provide guidance to the applicants to say, we want the absolute latest data in your stormwater calculation.
Yeah, the best management practices for stormwater management.
Ken, is that a fair
Okay.
summary?
Yeah, this is, I handed this out as to the, and this is the 6 points that required: public outreach and education, public participation, illicit discharge, management of construction, post-construction site runoff, and good housekeeping in municipal operations.
Yeah, I read that today. That was the one, some of them says already done.
Yeah, essentially we have those in place already.
Yeah. So why don't we plan that for the second half of the second meeting? So the first meeting, we
Well, I still think there's a couple of stormwater regs that we need to reword. We have to go find them. Do you know which ones we want to reword with best management, where we add those words?
Yeah, there's a couple of places where we
That's
can
what I
add
thought.
them in.
well,
All right.
isn't that kind of part of the reason for the meetings, is to address that stuff?
Or unless you want somebody to prepare so that we have something to review. So that we're not coming in while we're at the meeting trying to find
Yeah.
we all agree, okay, we want to update with best met, but where do we have to update that?
Okay.
All right, if it's not for the 18th, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, it's not for the 18th. No, we've already got our agenda for the 18th, Article 15
All
and
right,
Article 6.
maybe when I come by on Wednesday, we could talk.
Yeah, we can go over that too,
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
All right, cool. All right, member comments?
None today.
Mr. Schultz?
Can you come back to me? I have to think.
Sherry?
I looked at the record for Fearing Hill, and I just had a question. Looks as if everything is there with the exception of the minutes for the meetings. And I wondered what our status was on that, whether we are expecting people to simply find and refer to those, whether we need to call them out and have them here. I think, based on our conversation, Carl, there may be some of them that are not available online, but I just thought it would be good for us to sort of come to closure on this if we can.
Before we come to closure on Fearing Hill and we do our findings of fact, I think those meeting minutes need to be
On the site.
approved and
Filed with the town clerk.
Filed, yeah,
right.
filed. That's the word.
We don't usually include the minutes of the meetings with the findings of the special permits that we issue. Although we do reference the meeting dates that occurred so that you can look up the meeting minutes. But we can include the meeting minutes in the documentation anyway if you want to.
Whatever usual practice is fine. As long as there's a place that those of us who were not at those meetings can go to and look at those minutes if they're going to be part of the record.
Right.
We've been talking about this for a year. Over a year. Since I asked that question the first week, how come? And we need to put it to bed eventually.
Yep. Okay.
I have a quick question on the subject of the documents that are in there for Faring Hill. Could somebody clue me into the significance of site plan review in the town of Mount Pleasant, Gates of Heaven Cemetery? What is that?
You know, your guess is as good as mine. I wasn't here for any of that, but
that question was asked. Miss Hayes has submitted documentation that she feels goes to the credibility of the applicant.
Okay. You answered my question. Thank you.
so should that be outlined then differently?
No, I don't think we should. I asked that question. She stated that. I don't think we need to do.
I just mean in that memo that I sent out, if it's not clear, you know, should I just add a note? This was part of, you know, citizens' comment, additional information, you know?
Applicant.
Which I tried to do. Sherry and I were trying to do on the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. I have yet to cross-reference your list with my list. So I'm going to do that this week and then send you anything.
But Ms. Hayes has continued to submit documentations that very clearly, and I've spoken with her, I think Mike, very clearly in her mind, they're tightly linked, and she could see how this goes right to the point. And I
can
think,
empathize with
and
her.
we've tried to explain to her, well, you need to draw the links for some of us who are more process oriented.
Well, coming in cold, it's like.
But yeah, I think she submitted quite a few documents going to the credibility of the applicant.
Clear. Got it. Yeah, cool. I wasn't quickly able to draw that reference.
I don't assume that that's all of them, but that was some of them.
Got it.
There also are some documents about sight lines that may have evolved from a field trip that you all took to the site.
That was a requirement that we gave the applicant to draw sight lines for our review.
I wonder, I mean, I don't want to overly prolong or burden this proceeding, but that's something that I wasn't exposed to, and I think you were not exposed to either.
And I would love to go to the site.
Yeah, if we could.
And I was going to actually ask that question.
Do you want something organized to get somebody to show you around the place?
Organized would be great.
Are you going, Ken?
If it's a nice day, yeah.
I'll go. Count me in.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, so those sightlines were done in response to citizens' comments, and Sam, keep me honest, and Mike, that it's going to destroy their lives because the buffers were going to be inadequate and so on. So we asked the applicant to do a variety of sightlines, primarily from the perspective of residents along Old Fearing Hill Road, Squirrel Island, to address the issue of the buffer, which I think
that's a concern for me.
Yes, you brought up, and that was an attempt to address those concerns. And I think we can go out. I'd love to go again if we do a site visit. But I would say we can use those sight lines, presuming that we move forward with the project, and we want to condition the project to condition buffers. And that's why also the minutes are important, because we've talked in the past about greater buffers in certain areas, but that's maybe getting lost in the journey that this application has taken. But that's what the sightlines were for.
Yeah, so I think another field trip would be a really good idea.
Mr. Baptiste?
Just taking it all in, living the dream, you know?
Okay, so no more comments, questions. I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion, we adjourn.
Come on, Kyle, you know you want it. Second.
Yes, second, I'll second it, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion by Sam Corbett, second by Kyle Schultz. All in favor? Sherry?
Aye.
Mike? Aye. Jane?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Kyle?
Oh,
I know,
aye.
You want to
yes.
abstain, I know.
No, it's fine.
The chair votes aye. Thank you, everybody.